Hi, hello, and welcome, or welcome back, I suppose. So, with this book, I was supposed to be borrowing it from the library. You may have seen my short talking about this earlier this week, but if you haven't yet, so I reserved this as soon as I saw it. I was out shopping at Tesco, and I thought, look, I can't be buying any more books. The whole thing that I've been doing, because I'm still filming in April as at this point, so I'm like, I can't be buying more books. I'm trying to reduce that because I'm trying to read from my shelf. I've done a few at this point, but I reserved this from the library. And when you do that, you can see sort of how far along you are in the queue. Usually, at most, I'm like 5 to 10. So I've got a few open at the minute, which are even less than that. I mean, if I refresh this, it'll go off because I've actually picked up one of these today. But I'm at positions 1 and 2 with the ones that I haven't picked up yet, right? That's pretty standard for books that aren't in any kind of demand. Occasionally it's a little bit higher, but with books that are in slightly high demand, maybe they're newer or they've had some kind of big thing on TikTok or whatever, maybe at most I think I've been at position 15 to 20. I don't think I've ever been above 20. For this, I was at position 53. There was not a single chance I want to read this quickly. I love Stacey Hall's books. I've read all of the other stuff she's put out so far and I've been in love with them. So there was The Foundling there, but oh my god, why is my brain short-circuited? I love those books as well, but my brain is just not letting me remember them because my brain don't work right. Yeah, there was Mrs. England, The Foundling. Oh, and The Familiars, that was the first one she did. Sorry, my brain was just like, Ugh. But yeah, I knew that I was going to be reading that. She's one of those authors that I can pretty much guarantee that I'm going to like what she does. I've enjoyed everything else so far. And I've read all of her other stuff from the library. So, yeah, that's great. But not thinking, everything else I've read from hers at the library was either I was given it when I did the Six of the Best, when that was a thing, or I saw it there. I didn't ever have to reserve them. I'm definitely not sitting and waiting for 53. I think I refreshed it just before I cancelled that reservation and I went down to place 51. So I figured, yeah, probably not the best to be waiting that long because I want to be able to read it relatively soon because it is a new book. Urania Cottage reminds Martha of a doll's house, of a staged domestic life where, upon closer inspection, the fire is a pile of ribbons and the windows are pasted shut. London, 1847. In a quiet house in Shepherd's Bush, the finishing touches are being made to welcome a group of young women. The house and its location are secret, its residents unknown to one another, but the girls have one thing in common. They are fallen. Offering refuge for prostitutes, petty thieves and the destitute, Urania Cottage is a second chance at life. But how badly do they want it? Meanwhile, a few miles away in a Piccadilly mansion, millionaires Angela Burdett Coutts, one of the benefactors of Urania Cottage, makes a discovery that leaves her cold. Her stalker of 10 years has been released from prison and she knows it's only a matter of time before their nightmarish game resumes once more. As the women's worlds collide in ways they could never have expected, they will discover that freedom always comes at a price. The Household is a new novel from the award-winning Sunday Times best-selling author of The Familiars, The Foundling and Mrs. England, set against Charles Dickens' home for fallen women and inspired by real figures from history. It is Stacey Hall's most ambitious and captivating novel yet. And I can see the price that it usually, the sort of RRP, it's usually $16.99, which is about standard for hardbacks, especially new books anyway. Books are getting more and more expensive. I've noticed that even paperbacks. I swear paperbacks used to be the cheap option, but they're becoming more and more expensive if you buy them first hand, which is why I'm becoming even more of an avid library reader. It's also why I'm desperately trying to just go through my shelf because books are expensive. But I got that for I think £7 or £8, maybe a little more, but it was under £10. I got this for like paperback prices when I got it from Tesco, so I'm certainly not complaining at that. I think that was another reason that I was happy to be like, yeah, I think I can pick that up. And that was like, it was on sale as well. I don't know if it was on sale, if it was just like the club card prices thing, which club card prices are insane. I don't know why they're that, like, sometimes it feels like it's halving it. Anyway, God love club card prices. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to reading this, and thank you for getting caught on there. I hope you are too. I never know how to do these introductions anymore. You can tell I just talk, waffle, just pure bollocks. I don't script these intros. Why would I? That's no fun. Just a quick note to say that, once again, I am kind of sick, so I may sound a little nasally. I'm not 100% sure how I'm going to sound yet. I've tried to use a bunch of stuff to clear the airways, but who knows how well that's going to work. Anyway, on to the actual review. I want to open this by saying that I did really enjoy this book, but I want to be clear and say that I also found it kind of overwhelming. Not the whole book, but this was clearly a very ambitious novel from Halls, and while by the end, I think, definitely generally speaking, she did pull it together, I found it kind of tricky at times. We're given a lot of threads needing to be pulled together from a lot of different places, and yes, Halls does do it, but it can be hard to keep track of things at times. We're following 3 different people's stories, and yeah, of course, those stories do intersect, and when I got to, like, I think about a third of the way through, I did find my stride with it for the most part. Like I said, there was a level of feeling just a little overwhelmed, but, you know, it soon became more like putting a jigsaw together with all the little pieces handed to us along the way. This is honestly a really different book compared to her other stuff. It's still very clearly hers, and I did still enjoy it. It's just the whole experience was not at all what I expected. And a big part of that is the larger cast. It provides a lot more going on than the one plot line that we're used to with her. And it was really fun seeing how she brought it all together. So we have 3 main women that we're following. We have Angela Burdett Coutts, Martha Gelder, and Josephine. I don't recall ever learning her surname. If that's just something that I missed, it was only ever said once or twice, my apologies. So Angela is one of the main benefactors of a home called Urania Cottage, a halfway house for fallen women meant to help them move on from their pasts, usually criminal pasts. She's an incredibly wealthy heiress who also has spent around a decade trying to deal with a stalker called Richard Dunn. Martha is the first woman to enter Urania Cottage. The biggest part of her story is less why or how she ended up there, but instead about finding her missing younger sister, Emily. And Josephine is also a resident of Urania Cottage, though we first see her as she's coming to the end of her prison sentence. There, she's in a romantic relationship with her cellmate, Annie, and Josephine is under the impression that Annie will be joining her in going to Urania, but Annie changes her mind at the last minute. Much of Josephine's story revolves around Annie and her struggle with the idea that she perhaps does deserve the reform that Urania offers her. Like I say, their stories do obviously very much intersect, but for a little while it feels like we were getting a lot of little snippets that will eventually lead to something, and to be fair, they do, but it felt like we were getting a lot of little things at once, and it was just a case of, like, I think, like I was saying for that first third, it often felt like I wish we were spending more time with each person, which we do start to do later on. We start spending more dedicated time with people, but at first it felt a lot more a bit of this, a bit of that. And while this isn't necessarily my favourite of Hall's books, I still had a fantastic time. And I'm going to be honest, it was always going to be hard to stand up against her last book, Mrs. England. For me, at least, anyway. the thriller elements of that just did so much for me as a reader, and I did have to make sure I wasn't making too many comparisons, because these books aren't connected in any way beyond their author. But, there are actually still some thriller elements to this book, what with the stalking plotline, and while it isn't generally as sort of high action as Mrs. England was, it remains deeply unsettling all the same. There's one scene in particular where there's an unknown figure in one of the women's rooms, and it is so haunting. There's this feeling of powerlessness to that scene in particular that really sits in the bones, but I'll be honest, overall that feeling of being powerless really pervades the whole book in a variety of ways. And I think, as much as anything, that's because Halls really does write books about women. And, I mean, obviously, I've already said the main characters are all women, but it's, wider than that. I'm going to use Angela as a sort of catalyst for this, I guess. It's mostly so I'm not here, talking for an age. So, two things in particular to talk about. One, she is an incredibly rich and powerful woman, but she is never listened to, despite putting exactly as much into any given endeavour as the men that are there. And two, her being stalked is not taken seriously by the law at all. So, you may or may not have heard of Coots. My knowledge of it honestly only goes so far as being like, I'm pretty sure that's the bank that royals use. Like, I've heard of a Coots checkbook being linked to royalty. They're a bank for people with money. And Angela Burdett Coots, as you may have guessed, has quite a bit of stakes within the bank. And, quick aside, yes, she is based on a real historical figure, though this isn't, as far as I'm aware, a retelling of history as a sort of direct account, but it does use history and historical figures. Like, Urania Cottage was a real place. Angela was a real person who did create Urania Cottage, along with people like Charles Dickens, who does somewhat feature within this book. It's mostly his name comes up a few times. He is never he doesn't have a speaking role, as it were, but it is using parts of real history, but it's not necessarily claiming to be a direct account of things that have happened. Anyway, Angela has stakes in the bank. She married into it, but I don't know, she didn't marry into it? No, my brain's fallen out. Like I said, I'm sick. But, basically, the Burdettes and the Coots became one. I don't believe it was her that married into it, but effectively, her side of the family married into Coots, and she made an inheritance off that. So she still has huge stakes in this bank, but nobody talks to her about anything to do with it. And there really is no reason for that beyond the fact that she is a woman. The men who have similar stakes exist among themselves. She's just a silly woman, don't worry your pretty little head about it kind of stuff. And stalking just isn't taken seriously at all. And to be clear, it is obviously not just a problem that women face. Look at something like Baby Reindeer that came out recently that is based on a true story. But there's something about the way that Halls talks about Dunn's actions and how often he evades the law just by being a tricky little shit really hits. It's the sort of crime that is only ever taken seriously when the victim of it is dead. Halls never has to say as much either. We all just kind of get that, which sucks, but she does a really good job at portraying this woman living in abject fear and kind of being told that she's overthinking everything, despite the fact that she had to put up with this man's bullshit for a whole ass decade. She still has help from people, and people understand that she's in a bad scenario, but I think it's not surprising that the person that takes her most seriously is another woman. The way that Halls talks about
these women's issues, even though this is based in around about 1847, I think it does go a little bit further after that, but it really is one of those where it's like, mostly subtly being like, this is, you know, a wider issue than just these stories, and the fact that this is based however many years ago. I'm not going to try and do quick maths. You know, it's one of those where it's like she does a good job with doing that portrayal of this is still a nightmare. Also, as you may have spotted in my description of Josephine's story, this book got lesbians in it, and I love that for us. It's a relationship story, not so much focusing on, like, the specifically sapphic nature of their relationship, and that is not a negative, by the way. There has often been a real contrast, historically, in the way that people behave with pairs of women compared to pairs of men who are strikingly close to one another, be it historians looking back on people or accounts from the time where we have, you know, if this were a story about two men, they would have been punished for it, or ostracized at the least for any hint of homosexuality. But, you know, everyone knows that women are free of sexuality unless they marry a man, so they're just besties, just gals being pals. Emily Dickinson was just really close with her roommate. Like, hell, there are dumbasses out there that are so obtuse they choose to read Sappho's poems without the inherent lesbianism.
All that to say, I think that were people to write about Josephine and Annie, if they were historical figures, they probably would call them very close friends who lived with each other and seemed to really, really love each other in a entirely platonic way. They do have to be somewhat hidden, you know, they're not properly, let's say, intimate with each other around anybody else in the ways that a straight couple might be, but they are still very affectionate, and they're not hiding the fact that they do love each other. Well, when they're not having a whirlwind relationship, but honestly, I gotta give credit to Hawes on that one, because maybe it is just a stereotype that lesbian relationships are kind of dramatic, but the thing is, even if that's all it is, this book met those stereotypes without being malicious. There are just lesbians in this book, and it's honestly no big deal that that's what they are, and that's 100% a good thing. It doesn't always have to be a big deal, and again, I think it is fair that we've got it's not a big deal because they are a pair of women. Once again, were they a pair of men, and this isn't, in this scenario it would have gone very different, but this is a book about women, so it's different, you know? And not just because of the queerness, though that certainly helps, I think. I do definitely think that Josephine is my favourite character. She's got such a sense of justice for those that she cares about, and I love seeing her arc when it comes to dealing with her stubbornness. Like, she can take care of herself, but outside of Urania Cottage, that often means she's left in really rough and dangerous circumstances. She wants better for herself, but she's stubborn in the idea that this is where she is now, so she can't go back. And throughout, I always just wanted the best for her, and to be fair, that's true of many of the characters, but there's something about Josephine that I really clicked with, and honestly fell in love with. It's so often a case of watching her battle through life, and wanting her to come through the other side as unscathed as possible. I will say, there was one particular job she had with the collection stuff where I was really confused as to what was going on, and I'm not sure if I either missed some, like, implication, or that I was supposed to be shocked later on, which I was. I knew it was something to do with, like, the escorting business, I'll say that. Though, not her seemingly selling herself. The reveal was incredibly dark, and I had kind of had this, like, oh, I knew the area this was in, but I didn't see that coming. Grim, and while still dark, I did enjoy the way that Hawes used the initial revelation to
tie other parts of the plot together. But yeah, like with that job, I just wasn't really sure what was going on, and I think that was the point. But also I was like, did I miss something? Have I been told what they're actually doing? And if I did miss something, that's on me, obviously. But like I say, this isn't necessarily my favourite of Stacey Hall's books, but it's still incredible. I find her to be one of those authors that I can pretty safely rely on to provide the goods every time she releases something new. And I'm glad I didn't wait however long it would have taken me to get this in my hands had I stuck with the library reservation option. And you know me, I'm a library loving bitch. I'm constantly borrowing from there. It's where I do all my work for these videos, bar filming, and even if I have to put a reservation in for something, and I do have to spend a bit of money, 85p is a hell of a lot cheaper than any given book I'd buy first hand, even a paperback. But sometimes I can't get something quickly, and in this case, that is what I wanted to do. If I'd have known this book was coming out, I might have put in an early reservation, because sometimes you can pre-order from libraries, but as it stands, I'll take spending a bit of money, so I'm not waiting behind 50 odd people to get it in my hands. And just as a quick heads up, there will be no new video for a couple of weeks. I'm working on a longer video and need to give myself the time to be able to put all of that together. I'm not sure how long it'll take, because I do want to dive relatively deep into the series, but we'll see, won't we? I have planned that I'm definitely not doing a video next week or the week after. I'm hoping to have it done the week after that, but we'll find out. And let me know what you're reading in a minute in the comments below, or tell me about your favourite historical besties. You know the type. Feel free to like, feel free to subscribe, feel free to put your notifications on, and all that other cringe shit I'm supposed to ask you to do in my videos. But most importantly, I hope you have a wonderful day, a wonderful night, a wonderful whenever you are watching this. Take good care of yourself. Right.